Welcome to another Wichita Toy Train Club Lionel product review. I'm Zachariah. Behind the camera we have Chris, and today we're going to take a look at the new 2018 rendition of the Lionel Vision Line Challenger. So before we take a in-depth look at Lionel's newest rendition of the Union Pacific Challenger, a little bit of history on the Challengers. So there were 111 Challengers ordered by Union Pacific and built by the American Locomotive Company from 1936 until 1944. The Challengers evolved through these times, eventually actually shaping the face of the Union Pacific Big Boy, and also in turn the Big Boy shaping the last couple orders of Challengers. So the 3900 class Challengers that we see here are very similar to their big sister, the Big Boy. So all the Challengers all shared the same basic wheel arrangement. The Challengers are a simple articulated steam locomotive, meaning we only use the steam once, and they are in a 4664 wheel arrangement. So as I mentioned, there were 5 total orders of Challengers, and today we're going to be looking at really the last 2 orders, or mainly the 4th order of Challengers, which we see here, which covered 3975 all the way to 3999. Of course, the famous 3985 for being one of the 2 surviving Challengers, the other being 3977 in North Platte, Nebraska, and also the 3975, which we'll get into why it's special a little bit later. But also in the 4th order of Challengers, there were 6 Challengers that were diverted to the Denver, Rio Grande, and Western Railway by the War Production Board. The War Production Board did a lot of restrictions on locomotive design and building to restrict the amount of steel that we used during the war times. So in order to help the Denver and Rio Grande keep up with wartime traffic, they diverted 6 of Union Pacific's Challengers there, and then they were there until they were sold to the Clinchfield out east. So after covering some of the basic history on the Challengers, we'll go in a little bit in depth on each of these 2 models that we have here. The first being the 3985, which is the probably the most known Challenger out there. Again, like I said, this is from the 4th order of Challengers. The 3985 was restored by Union Pacific employees in their off time in 1981, and it has been used since then in excursion service with the Union Pacific's 844 Northern, and most recently the 4014 Big Boy. At this current time, the Challenger has not been seen since about 2010 due to mechanical problems and the 1472-day inspection. Don't be fooled by anything else you see on the internet. They have complete plans to go ahead and do a full rebuild of the 3985. As they rebuilt 4014, they have ordered any similar parts to be able to help rebuild 3985. They just spent 5 years on the 844 and the 4014, so it will be a little bit before we see the 3985 again, but we will see her again. The other Challenger that we have here today is the 3975. And this particular locomotive is not very well known for the reason that we have it here today. In 1948, when Union Pacific got the 4th order of Challengers, they went ahead and experimented with a single smokestack. As you can see here on this, Union Pacific's been very known for liking their big double stacks on almost all of the 3900 series Challengers, along with the FEFs, both the 2nd and 3rd series FEFs and the Big Boys. So they were experimented for about a year with this particular Challenger to see if they would like to change their Challengers to a single stack. Ultimately, that was considered a failed experiment, and they switched back to a double stack. So what we have here is a LCCA exclusive. You could only order this through the LCCA, and with that you got a 1-year free membership. Wasn't any extra price or anything added to it, but it was a full MSRP, and you got a 1-year membership with the LCCA, and it has the single stack. Now, Union Pacific's not the only one that did this. when the clinch field got the 6 challengers from the Denver and Rio Grande Railway, they went ahead and switched to a single stack. So there are all kinds of different challengers that Lionel produced with this second run. Of course, being this special 3975, which we'll get some nice cool running shots later, and along with some clinch field challengers with the single stack, and some Denver and Rio Grande Western challengers, and those still had the double stacks. A few features on Lionel's newest rendition of the Challenger. This Challenger, of course, has all the bells and whistles being Vision Line. So we have our Legacy control system, which allows us to run, of course, with Legacy, which is the preferred method and recommended method. Of course, you can always run it with TMCC or conventionally with just transformer and some track. And along with all the new Legacy locomotives, these are Bluetooth equipped, which allows you to run it with the Lion Chief Universal Remote or your app with any device that can download the Android or Apple app. These locomotives also feature a total of 3 separate smoke units, one for your main stack, one for your whistle, and one for the Dynamo and Injector Smoke effect. These also have all LED lighting, so we have Rule 7T lighting with our headlights. So that means when we come to a stop after about 10-15 seconds, our headlights dim. We have illuminated number boards on each side of the headlights, along with the classification lights up top and the number boards up top. When we go ahead and we add track power on later, you'll see that the classification lights on top of the boiler are the only things that come on at first, and everything comes on later. Let's go in for a closer look. We've zoomed in here on our front pilot on the 3985. So right up front here, we have our nice looking cow catcher with an air hose down here on the end of it. It is painted red. That's real nice. Up front, we have our scale coupler that will swing out. This particular one gets kind of tricky. Excuse my hand. And it flips out just like that. We can interchange this for a dummy O-scale coupler for double heading. So both the this piece here and the scale coupler come out. Moving up, we have a little lift ring here, along with a couple of cut bar up front. Moving up, we have some nice molded in details for our radiator vents, along with some flag posts down here. Moving up, we have our headlight. This is a nice bright LED headlight with our Rule 17, like I mentioned earlier. And then the sides of the headlight have their own separate LEDs for those illuminations. And then moving up top here, we do have some safety tread on the walkway, so that's always really nice. And one of our very nice separately applied handrails. Moving up on the front of our smoke box here, up front we have our Union Pacific shield with a nice crisp 3985, a separately applied handrail across the top here, 2 green classification lights. This is where it always gets controversial with excursion engines. This is supposed to be an excursion model of the 3985, so in all reality, these should be clear classification lights. If you're a rivet counter, that's just something to note. If most people, it's just not worth worrying about. And then moving up, we have illuminated number boards, and like I mentioned earlier, these do come on immediately when track power is applied. We have a separately applied bell, and the front of our smoke box does open up. And unlike the 2010 version of the Challengers, there is no separately any detail on the inside there. See if I can get a picture of my 2010 Challenger, just to show you. The 2010 Challenger did have a little bit of detail in there. This one doesn't. All right, now we're right behind our front pilot. Right up front here, kind of gets snugged right down inside that pilot is one of our 2-stage air pumps. We have that detail here, and there's one on the other side. Moving forward, we have our front steam cylinder, which is, of course, looks really nice. We have all of our associated exhaust steam lines that swing out when the locomotive goes around a curve. Moving back, we have all kinds of different stuff going on here with our running gear. And all of this is operating and looks great when the locomotive is in operation. And as we look down up in here, there's one of our work lights that will turn on the locomotive is here. Move over, I believe the other one is right in this here area. And of course all of our other nice looking pipes and so forth are around our front engine. Moving back, here's our rear engine. And right up front is our rear engine steam chest on the engineer side of the locomotive. And of course all of our side rods and lubrication cranks and everything with the eccentric crank all looks really nice. Up here underneath the walkway there's a lot of separately applied details that can be really hard to see. And but they're all there. We have some hand-painted valves up in here. Back up in there, if you see a little brass piece, that's actually a bushing or so for some gears of the gearbox for the model. We have a nice looking reverser and everything here, and all kinds of pipes that go all the way back to our cab. Back over here around our cab, we have a nice gray firebox here that looks really nice. And here's all of those pipes right underneath our walkway. All that looks really nice, and they go all kinds of different directions and all of that. Over here is some of our injector details. So this is actually where some of our smoke will come out on the injector smokes. And then we have a bunch of cast-in details on our trailing truck, which look really nice. Nice bright red handle. I'm not 100% sure what that's there for. I'd almost say it'd be for the ash pan on the coal burning Challengers, but both of these are going to be oil burning, so I'm not sure why that's still there, but it could be for something else too. Quick thing I want to note is on all of our coal burning Challengers there will be an ash pan detail right here, and within that there will be a variable ash pan glow effect. These are both oil burning Challengers that we have here today, so we will not have that feature. With oil, there's no byproduct or anything of that. We burn all of our liquid oil, so there's no need for an ash pan, which means there's no glow just kind of ruminating down from the firebox. But all of our coal burning Challenger models will indeed have that. We're back up front here on the front of our smoke box. Right up top here we have our big difference, and that is here on the 3985 we have our two big twin stacks. Now these do both funnel down into one single smoke unit. So when you add smoke fluid, just pour it directly down one of the stacks, not both, and you usually prime with about 20 to 25 drops. And this also feeds our smoke fluid for our whistle steam smoke effect. And on the Challengers, it also, I personally think the whistle steam effect is really nice because we have a little hole below the whistle obscures that hole, and it looks really nice when that effect has a full smoke output. And around our whistle, we have a bunch of molded in details along with some separately applied pipes and hand-painted valves and so forth. Moving down, biggest thing down here, we have our handrail for that goes down the entire length of our boiler. Do keep in mind this is our antenna for the Legacy and TMCC control system. I don't know if this has anything on the Bluetooth. I imagine with the Bluetooth board being on the inside of this die-cast boiler might be kind of hard, so it also might use these handrails as an antenna, but I do not know that for sure. Moving down, we have some more molded in details. These are all there on our 3975 model. It's just hard to see because we have those smoke deflectors in the way. Down here we have our legible Alco Builder's plate along with another plate added by the Union Pacific Railroad. Those are all legible. If we can get a better shot of that later, we might add that in here. And we have the start of some other sand pipes and our throttle linkage. Before we move back a little bit, Chris just reminded me, so if anybody's wondering on the difference on the Challengers versus the Big Boy, the Vision Line Big Boy did have two separate smoke units in these double stacks, so we had a puff, 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 whereas in this case we have one single stack, whereas all of our smoke for each puff comes out all at once. And the reason for that is actually that was an unprototypical feature that Lionel put in on the Vision Line Big Boy. More than likely, somebody was looking for a really cool feature to put in the Big Boy, and in my opinion, it is still by far a really cool feature. It looks amazing, but it is technically unprototypical because in all reality, our steam exhaust from all 4 cylinders is going to just kind of come together right here in our smoke box, and there's just going to be one big funnel that, you know, our draft steam is going to come up through there, along with all of our exhaust steam. That way it comes out both stacks, which you can reprogram a Vision Line Big Boy to do to work that way, but just thought I'd go ahead and point that out. Moving back across the top of our boiler here, we have a bunch of molded in details on top of their front stand dome. This is for our front engine, and we have some separately applied piping that goes down to there, along with, of course, there's our handrail. Do keep in mind, like I mentioned earlier, this is the antenna, but because of that, all of these stanchions are plastic, so that's what is more easily to break than the antenna itself. Again, moving back, there are our steam dome here. This is all molded in details, along with our boiler jacketing. We have our separately applied pop-off valves here, with a little red hand-painted valve up top there, which looks really nice. All right, we've moved back to our rear sand dome and our dynamo area. So our rear sand dome, again, there's plenty of molded in details on top there. And this pops off just like that. It's held down by a couple magnets. There is a little pin here, so it only goes on one way. Set that off to the side here for a second. And this shows all of our controls for the locomotive. So starting up front here, we have our whistle smoke switch, our volume pot for the, this does have the stereo sound, so there is a soundboard and speaker in the boiler up here to localize a lot of the sounds, which is really nice. We have our Dynamo smoke on-off switch, a Bluetooth on-off switch, and then a run program on-off, or run program switch, I should say. Just kind of a little bit in depth here. So we have a Bluetooth switch now. This allows us to engage or disengage the Bluetooth board on the inside of the engine. A lot of the first legacy engines with Bluetooth did not have this, and so technically if you go out to a show or something, somebody has an app. Even if you're running this with legacy, you can connect to that Bluetooth board, and that Bluetooth board just starts sending signals to the main control board, and it'll start overriding legacy signals. But then it'll pick up legacy signals, so it's like a hijacking type deal. So that's why there's a Bluetooth on and off switch now. And we've added the master volume pot up front for the front speaker. This is different than the 2010 version. And with that, we have lost our separate smoke or stack and whistle smoke switches. So if that's a big deal, they run off the same reservoir, so that's probably why they figured they could combine that switch together. So now it's either stack and whistle smoke or no smoke at all. While we have the locomotive flipped around here, we'll go ahead and take a look at the dynamo. So the dynamo is a steam generator. This is what creates all of the electrical power for the locomotive, for the headlight. And in this case, at the 3985, it runs an excursion service, so we have to have power for the radio and any in-cab signals that they have to have per FRA standards. So, and that's what this does. It creates that electrical power. So there's always constantly a little bit of steam coming out of there to keep that electrical power running. So what they did here is we have steam that will shoot up out of here, some smoke, and then this also feeds over to our injectors where I mentioned earlier. So our dynamo piece pops out just like that. And to add smoke fluid for both the injectors and the dynamo, we just, they include a little funnel. We'll set it right here in our little hole, and we'll just pour fluid directly down this stack here. Now, it is kind of hard to get it from here to inside the smoke unit. So they actually, somebody's recommended to, when you add fluid to the dynamo and injector unit, to go ahead and prop the engine up and lean it forward to where the cab is actually higher than the front of the locomotive. and let that sit for a little bit, and that helps get that fluid down in the smoke unit. And a couple other things to note. So with this being the second run of Vision Line Challengers, Lionel's learned what worked and what didn't work on the first 2010 run. And one of those things is that the dynamo piece was actually really loose on top of the boiler here. And so what they've done is they've went ahead and drilled this extra little hole right here on the inside, on the boiler casting. And on our dynamo piece, we have an extra little pin here. And what that does is that pin matches up with that hole when we set this back together. If I can get that to go in there like it's supposed to. Just like that. Kind of hard in front of the camera. But that way, our dynamo holds in place very easily. We get a chance to pull out the 2010 Challenger, and if I just kind of bump this right here, that dynamo piece will just fall right off. Moving down to our cab area again here, I just want to go ahead and give you a little bit closer look from the fireman side of the cab. We have our nice crisp 3985, along with all of our nomenclature underneath that. So our 4664, that mentions the order and the stoker type, anything like that. Of course, this is an oil burning Challenger, so no stoker. Anyway, and as you can kind of see up top there, there is our little cab vent roof. Kind of out of focus, but that is up there, something to just note. On the back here, since we have the tender disconnected, we have our nice separately applied handrail right here, along with some canvas curtains to be able to close off the back of the cab in the winter time. And this is our drop plate that goes in between the engine and tender. That's got safety tread on it, and that looks really nice. And down here is our locomotive end of the wireless tether in between the engine and tender. Now we're looking on the inside of the cab. I have track power on, that way our cab light's on so we can see a little bit better. As we can see, the entire back head of that boiler looks really nice, all kinds of separately painted red valves and so forth. Right there in the middle, you can see kind of that bulky thing there in the middle. That is our kind of that cover for the firebox for an oil burning steam locomotive. And so that is where usually you see our two big sliding opening doors for a coal-fired, and that's, like I said, usually where the firebox flicker comes from. In this case, that's not there, so no firebox flicker. Now we're looking at our Greyhound Tender. This is the same exact tender as the 3985, it's just different color. Figured we'd throw a little bit of color in here. So starting off, we have our receiving end of the wireless drawbar. So that tells all our chuffs and whistle sounds and everything. Right up here is some molded in details. Not a whole lot going on down here. There's an auger detail right here, which I find kind of funny because these are oil fired, not coal fired, but it's, you know, just probably just standard tooling. This piece pops out anyway, tooling wise. Not a big deal, you don't see it. And over here on each side we have these nice separately applied ladders which look really nice. And of course all kinds of molded in details and panels on the front of this tender here. And like I said, molded in, it's not a big deal because you don't really ever see it when the engine's in motion. We have some nice separately applied grab irons on each side here. And we have our another little builder's plate on the side there, which is legible, and we might get a little bit better shot here later. Moving down the side of our tender here, this is where the Greyhound paint scheme I think really shines, is on the tender. The locomotive, the boiler jacketing is different and kind of around the cab, but this is where it really shines, is over here with our Union Pacific logo right here. It's a nice crisp UP yellow with that darker gray behind it, and our nice crisp UP yellow lines, then that same gray that the boiler has everywhere else. It just, Union Pacific didn't experiment a whole lot on different paint schemes, so anytime we get anything other than black on Union Pacific, it's, wait a second, we got to stop and look at this. But on the tender itself, there's not a whole lot going on here. Of course, there's all kinds of rivets up and down the side of our tender here. All of our side frames down here are molded in. We have some nice yellow, or not yellow, sorry, white or silver caps on our bearings here, which all look very nice. And over here on the end, we have a separately plied ladder that goes up to our top, which looks real nice. Some more pipes. I'm pretty sure these are molded in, but they still look really nice. So all over, it's a nice looking tender. On the back of our tender here, right up front, we have our big O-gauge electrocoupler that can be fired from our Team CC legacy remote or from our Line Chief app or universal remote. Something to keep in mind. Right down here, we have our capacity levels here. I believe water says 23,500 gallons and fuel is 6,000 gallons. Moving up, we have a nice crisp UP 3975. Of course, on our 3985, we have 3985. Over here is our illuminated classification lights, or marker lamps. Those look really nice. Those come on when we go ahead and fire up the locomotive. They don't come on with track power. We have our backup light, and then another marker light. Moving up, we have the top of our tender here. Of course, like I said before, this is all the same on the 3985. We have some simulated wood decking up top here, all molded in. We have some separately applied handrails all up top here that look real nice. We go ahead and flip that up. All of these water hatches do open up. There is nothing on the inside of these anymore. They've removed both the rail signal sound, which used to be over here on the tender, and then I did forget to mention on the locomotive, we no longer have an Odyssey speed control on-off switch, so you always have speed control on. You cannot turn that off. Just go ahead and mention that. And then moving up, we have a nice looking toolbox right here, and this does go ahead and remove, excuse my fat fingers, and that's held down by magnets. That way it doesn't come off unless you want it to. And we have our master volume pot for the 2 speakers inside the tender. We'll try to see if we can't get a decent shot, but the tender sounds really complement the front engine sounds, because the front engine is where a lot of our sounds come from. You know, whistle, bell, the big, deep chuff. But the tender has a lot of echo to it. So that's always something nice to keep in mind. Moving forward on the tender here, we have where our coal would be if this was a coal-fired locomotive, whereas in this case we're oil-fired, so we have a couple oil hatches here. This is all molded in. These don't open or anything. Some nice separately plied handrails up top here, and a couple other molded in details up front. But other than that, that about covers it. All right, moving on to our Greyhound Challenger locomotive. Like we mentioned before, the biggest difference is going to be the paint scheme and then our single stack. So we'll get a little bit closer shot up here of our single stack. That way you can kind of see what it looks like up top. But that's the biggest difference there. And then of course our side rods. From Lionel's catalog, almost every Challenger has darkened side rods except for the 3985. So I'm not 100% sure if it's a two-tone gray thing, an oil-fired thing, a coal thing. I'm not 100% sure really. But you might have to look up some other pictures of other Challengers if you want to know for sure. But I know for sure, I can confirm that the 3975 has darkened side rods and the 3985 does not. Real quick, we went ahead and changed angle here. That way you can kind of see up front our big differences, kind of our elephant ear look on the side for the Greyhound, along with our single stack difference between our double stack. It's definitely a unique look for a Union Pacific Challenger, and it's just something really cool that the LCCA did with Lionel. We got our Challenger flipped upside down here. Up front is our trailing truck here, and as always, especially on these high-end engines, always go ahead and make sure you put some oil down in here where those axles go through the metal frame. Always a good idea. And of course, on your center rail pickup rollers, and then right where our drivers go through the metal frame. It's always a good place to put some oil, along with, of course, all of our side rod details. That way we don't have any squeaking or anything going on with our high-end engine. Moving back, we have our Legacy serial number, which is really cool. They've been putting on all of their Legacy engines. They've been doing it on Vision Line engines since the start of it, but they've, here in the past couple of years, been putting serial numbers on for legacy locomotives, which I think is a really nice added touch. Another quick note is right back here, this is our hinge for our front engine. Always keep an eye on this. That screw will sometimes get loose. Always make sure that's tight. That way that doesn't fall out and that front engine just kind of does whatever it does without that screw in there. Moving back, same thing on oiling on our front engine here. Just always keep an eye on it. If it looks wet, you're good. A little will always go a long way, but a little bit of oil, like I said, goes a long way and keeps those squeaks from happening. On our trailing truck here, same thing, where our needlepoint axle goes into those plastic bearings. Always a good place for some oil. Kind of hard to see, but down right up in here is our Vision Line serial number. So for whatever reason, we have two separate serial numbers, one for Legacy and one for Vision Line. Which one technically should you use? I don't know. I kind of like this placement a little bit better. It's kind of hard to see, but the 2010 Challenger put it right here on the deck plate here, and of course your deck plate kind of rubs up against the tender, so now you run the risk of just losing it. And then another thing I wanted to point out is right here is where our smoke comes out for our injector smoke. Now, I could have swore that there was a second port, but I cannot find it on this locomotive. At the very least, I could have swore there was one on the, about right up in here and straight down on the track, actually, is what the 2010 Challenger had. Reason for the difference, I don't know, and I might just be dreaming of things. Now we got the tender flipped over here. Same thing as always, a little bit of oil right where those axles go into the brass bearings on each side for these centipede tenders. A lot of spots for it to squeak. We have two center rail pickup rollers for good electrical contact, and those tend to squeak, so a little bit of oil on the end of those goes a long way. Right here we have our IR sensor for the LCS sensor track. Do keep in mind that this is going to be the only way to automatically upload all the engine information into your legacy base. If you don't have a sensor track, you're going to have to enter all of that in through the cab 2 manually, as these engines no longer come with a separate engine memory module. And of course, all the same oiling stuff applies to our front truck on the tender. And again, on the screws, for whatever reason, these big screws I've seen where they get loose and they just fall out. So keep an eye on those. Sometimes they get loose and they just they ride there, but when you pick it up, they fall out all the way. And then other times they fall out all the way and short the track out, and you're running around trying to find a track short. All right, so now we're got power on the track. As you can see, our number boards are illuminated, meaning we got track power on. Of course, I know we got track power on. So let's go ahead and fire them up and listen to some of the sounds.
Cheyenne Yard Office calling the 3985.
3985 answering. Go ahead. Over.
Clear to pull down the house lead. Over.
Sounds good. 3985 out.
Laramie Yard Office calling the 3975.
3975 answering. Go ahead. Over.
Clear to move east on one runner when ready. Over.
Roger that. 3975 out.
All right, and as you can tell, there is road-specific crew talk and dialogue and everything on these. Same engineer and dispatcher, though, voice-wise, but they do call out the separate engines. So that's something really to note on the Vision Line engines. And these both have the same whistle, and I believe it's the same whistle with the Vision Line Big Boy. So we'll go ahead and give that a listen real quick. Now the Greyhound. Same exact whistle sound. It was probably going to be real hard to tell, but we have like an echo going on from the front of the engine all the way back with the stereo sound system. And then another thing to note when you go ahead and fire these up, the first thing that's going to come on during the extended crew talk sequence is going to be your dynamo and injectors, because that's as your lights come on, you technically already have steam to be able to have power to turn on those lights. As you can hear, these locomotives sound great. So now, since we got to sounds, we got to address the elephant in the room. When Lionel shipped these, the sounds were incorrect. And what I'm talking about is on the chuff. So one thing that still bothers some people is that our drivers are actually in sync. Being an articulated steam locomotive, the likelihood of these being in the same exact position is astronomical. I mean, don't get me wrong, it happens, but the likelihood is slim to none. So that's one thing, but with that, they only did 4 chuffs per revolution. Now, what's wrong with 4 chuffs per revolution? That's what all of our big, high-end steam locomotives do. Well, with an articulated steam locomotive, we actually have 8, because we're not just doing 2 cylinders. One exhaust stroke for be 2 exhaust strokes per revolution of each cylinder. So in this case, we have 8. So like on the Vision Line Big Boy with our puff 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 on the separate dual stacks, it was actually a instinct show that we had those 8 chuffs per revolution. An exhaust stroke for each of these cylinders, each half of the cylinder. So Lionel acknowledged that, and they went ahead and allowed everything to come in for warranty. You just had to call them, let them know that you wanted the sound set changed, and they received everything and re-updated the smoke unit, so that way our smoke goes with our chuff now, and added the extra chuff. So our 3985 here has had the update and has the new articulated steam set sounds. The 3975 has not had that done yet to it. So we're going to be able to hear the difference between what was shipped and what Lionel's fixed. And while there was an issue and a lot of people want to bash Lionel for that, things happen. That's just what it comes down to. One thing got overlooked, and that's what happens. But Lionel took knowledge of it and got it fixed. The only other thing is, for whatever reason, on the Dynamo and Injector Smoke unit, for whatever reason, when you fill those, especially on my 3985, I don't know where it comes from, you can spill no smoke fluid, but all kinds of smoke fluid will build up right there along the walkway. And when I send it in, I mentioned it and nothing happened. So I'm kind of concerned about it, but not enough to pop it open and look for myself yet. Okay, we're over here at our old modular layout. This layout we used to take to shows and everything, but it's Challenger and 21-inch passenger car friendly on the outside loop. So came over here to run the train. We got the engines double-headed. I was actually wrong earlier when I mentioned this actual piece here does stay in when you put in the dummy coupler. I'll just put that in. You just replace the scale coupler for the dummy O-gauge coupler. And I got my UP Excursion passenger cars back there, so we'll go ahead and take it for a loop. Go ahead and mention this. I have the whistle for both of them on, so the whistle seems really loud. It's because they're both actually whistling, because they're the same whistle. So we'll go ahead and see how it sounds.
Yard office to the 3975.
3975 answering. Go ahead. Over.
Make a pull to the pit to top her off. Over.
Roger that. 3975 out. 3975 to the tower, showing a clear signal in the cab. We'll be moving soon.
Over. Copy that. Dispatcher out.
Union Pacific 3975 to the tower. We're on the move. Over.
Thanks, 3975. Have a good run.
The water's full. I'm at slow speed. 3975 out. This is Union Pacific 3975. Do we have a clear route? Over.
No speed restrictions through the interlocking. All clear.
Our water is just about empty. 75 out.
Operator to the 3975. Crossing longitude of planet. Keep them rolling.
Thanks. Clear in on signal indication. Out. We're in the full stop, and we'll let you know when we're rolling again. Union Pacific 3975 to the tower. Heading for the Y. See you tomorrow. Out.
As we've seen, these Challengers are a great addition to Lionel's Vision Line product line, and they will look great on any layout that they can fit on. Like we haven't mentioned yet, these are a minimum 072 required curve, and I would strongly recommend keeping with those. The locomotive itself might actually track through through a curve, but the biggest thing is going to be that centipede style tender in the rear. Those always tend to be the biggest thing with anything smaller than an 072. These Challengers, like we've seen, run great, sound great, and there are a number of different models that you can choose from in the 2018 Volume 2 catalog. There's, of course, a bunch of Union Pacific, plenty of coal-fired or oil-fired burning Challengers in either a black or a two-tone gray paint scheme. There's even a fantasy scheme in the controversial 49er scheme. You either love it or you hate it. I've heard from a number of sources that the most ordered Challenger from this catalog was the 49er Challenger, only second to the 3985, of course, being extremely famous. These locomotives retail right at $2,000. If you go through any decent Lionel dealer, you probably get a little bit of discount on that retail price, but do keep in mind The LCCA version Challenger was sold exclusively through the LCCA, so that was a strict MSRP price. But you also got the full year membership. I highly doubt by the time this video goes out that they have any extras. So if you find one, it's probably going to be on a third-party market. This concludes our review of the Lionel 2018 run of the Vision Line Challenger. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of our product reviews and running train videos. And be sure to go down in the description. I'll put a link for both of these particular models to Lionel's website, along with our Facebook page. Be sure to go over there to know all of our open hours here in Wichita, Kansas, along with any upcoming train shows in the greater Wichita area. Thanks for watching.